clock has struck 3 a.m. The witching hour has begun. Are you ready to be initiated into the Black Magic Coven? Join your sisters, Andrea,
Kaleigh,
Liz,
and Marisa,
as we meet to discuss the macabre, creepy, and sinister. We call upon the four corners to transport us to the movies. We also welcome special guest Jill Sixx Gevargizian, director, producer, writer, and hairstylist from Kansas City, Missouri. In 2012, she decided to bring independent genre films to her hometown by creating a monthly showcase called Slaughter Movie House. She founded Sixx Tape Productions in 2014 with her directorial debut, Call Girl. And since then, she has written, produced, and helmed numerous short films, most notably The Stylist in 2016. The film screened at genre film festivals across the globe and won 20 awards. That short was also the inspiration for her debut feature of the same title, which will release via Arrow Video on March 1st. So I'm gonna steal a little bit from the Nightmare Junkhead podcast and welcome the goth gangsta princess. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna put my crown on for this.
Yes.
My tiara.
So one of the big reasons that we wanted Jill to join us today was that she also wrote and produced 42 Counts in 2018, which was based on a true story about two unsuspecting victims spending their night off watching scary movies in an apartment rented from their boss until they uncover something much more sinister than what they've been watching on screen. So today we're all here to discuss some of our favorite horror films inspired by real events. That's always scariest, right? Like when it's real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot out there too.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we have a pretty good variety for everyone today. I feel like we should start with just Jill, like asking Jill 42 Counts, when you were working on that film, was it just that you read the story and you immediately knew that, oh wow, this would make a good short? Or how did the process happen as far as like coming up with, okay, now I'm going to translate this true story into a short?
Yeah, actually making that one was very scary in a way that nothing else was, because it was based on a real thing. To fill people in, it's about this tattoo shop in Kansas City, and the owner owned some apartments above it. He was renting it out to a girl who ended up finding like a dozen cameras in her apartment, and they all led to a computer in the basement where said creepy owner was like watching her for God knows how long.
It's so fucked up.
And actually, I heard about it like right when it happened. I knew someone very personally that worked at that shop and kind of was there when the first camera was found. And so it really I didn't think about it like a film or anything. I was just like really disturbed by it and thought about it like, wow, this is like a new thing that the law hasn't caught up to, that doesn't, really do justice to how much that can traumatize someone. And it's just treated like an invasion of privacy when it's much more than that, or it's pretty serious. And so yeah, we actually we shot the footage that would show up on this computer in our film version, and it is horrifying to imagine that someone went through all of this planning and put these cameras behind walls. And it's just years later it dawned on me as something maybe we could make into a short, because I was wanting to make something that wasn't really a horror film, that was just like two people, a really contained idea. And then I don't know why I thought about that story again. We developed it into a short to kind of make people think about those kind of crimes and what they do to people. And like the guy who did that was in jail for only like less than a year, and so
Wow.
that's scary.
It was super effective though, because like I know there was like early on in the short, like they're sitting on the couch, and I want to say it was a smoke detector that like she gets up and pulls down. It was like, what is that? It was like a light coming off it or something. It was like creepy to think that like at any moment somebody's just watching you.
You know, that's my fear of Airbnbs.
Yeah. I think it's valid too.
I mean, yeah.
Those cameras are way too easy to buy that come in like every shape that look like something else. It's very scary.
Yeah, it's definitely. Did anyone see The Rental this year?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's like your Airbnb thing, Kaleigh, would kind of somewhat apply to that movie.
I've been
so.
Is that streaming somewhere?
I think I had to rent it. I think.
Okay,
so.
I might just rent it. I need some.
Yeah, it's definitely worth the watch. That's for sure.
Yeah, and the fact that that guy only spent a year in jail for invading somebody's extreme privacy is absolutely bonkers.
Because what's scary about that is that people with that type of a thing typically escalate with time.
Yeah.
Like, not enough. I think that's what happened already. Like there were just a couple of those fake smoke detector cameras in the main part of the house or the apartment. And then they ended up finding all these tiny cameras that were actually like installed in the wall in the bathroom. And he told her he was remodeling her bathroom at one point. So I have this like theory that he did that just right under her nose, put these cameras in.
Yeah, that's terrifying. Well, we have a few different movies that we wanted to talk about. We kind of went all over the place. And so, Jill, we hope that you'll kind of pop in with our convo as well as we talk about these. And I know that you have one that you'll be talking about that's a definite favorite of yours. So I am going to start off the night with The Conjuring, which is question mark real events. I'm going in heavy with my skepticism. Well,
and are we
The Conjuring,
the Conjuring universe? Or are we talking just The Conjuring?
I mostly just focus on The Conjuring. I do mention, like, I think we'll get into a little bit of the universe, but I mostly want to talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren. So we're going to talk about a little bit about, everything they've done with their careers, and especially in the film world. And, do we believe it? I don't know. I don't, but maybe you guys do.
They're good movies. They're good movies.
They are good movies. They are good movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have some really like effective jump scares in that franchise.
Agreed.
And I don't like jump scares, but they do them actually pretty well.
Agreed, yeah.
And I think that first Conjuring is like a legit, very good horror movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, when I was doing research about it, I think somebody brought up a really good point where it was one of the first horror movies to kind of bring back some classic horror, because we were in that really obsessive like torture porn phase of horror.
God, yeah.
And so The Conjuring kind of brought back like, oh, not everything has to be cutting people's fingers off. We can also do like some paranormal, creepy stuff and still have it be truly scary.
Yeah.
Because I think for a while, that the paranormal stuff kind of lost its scariness.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think this movie definitely brought that back for me, and I think for a lot of people. So I am not a skeptic about how good these movies are. I think, well, at least the first one and the second one, I think too. But I haven't seen all of the spin-offs, but I do truly think that Ed and Lorraine maybe were put on this earth to lie about a lot of stuff so that they could make good movies. But
that was their purpose.
Yeah,
and have one of like the cutest couples though, like Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson. They're precious. I love their relationship.
I will say, Marisa, if you look at the real Ed and Lorraine, they definitely got Hollywood hot.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Totally. I haven't ever Googled the real couple, so like.
Oh, you should.
Let me keep my.
I mean,
Yeah.
They're not like they look normal, like normal people, you know. I mean,
They kind of
like,
look like your gothic grandparents a little bit, you know, like spooky and like they would have paintings of themselves, you know, like staring at you over a fireplace mantle type thing. But yeah, their depiction in The Conjuring, I think I really like their relationship and their dynamics. And it's fun too because Lorraine makes a cameo in the first one, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So just a little bit about the movies. Obviously, we're talking about The Conjuring, which is about Ed and Lorraine Warren, but it's specifically about one of their cases. And so Ed and Lorraine Warren were paranormal investigators, and I say this with air quotes. And
you guys are coming in hard.
I know. Because I don't like liars, man. Okay. So, The Conjuring depicts the 18th century farmhouse in Rhode Island where Roger and Caroline Perrone, I believe, which are Lily Taylor and Ron Livingston in the movie, and their 5 daughters allegedly were terrified and even possessed by spirits. So, Ed Warren died in 2006, but Lorraine, who is now 86, well, actually, that's probably not correct because I looked this up later. I'm not sure how old she is, but she was a consultant on the film and remains a paranormal investigator to this day. She insists that many of the movie's harrowing moments actually happened. She says that things went on that were just so frightening, and it still affects her to this day to talk about them, even though they were, 40 years ago.
So I think Lorraine actually passed away in 2019, but she did work as like a paranormal investigator up until her death.
That's crazy.
Okay.
And clairvoyant.
Thank you for fact checking me.
For sure.
Betty White.
Yeah, because I forgot to check a more recent source. So yeah. She did seem like a truly nice woman, and so I think that like they think they were helping people. I'm not totally convinced that they were bad people by any means. I think that they were trying to help people. I just also think that a lot of this stuff is, I don't know. I think a lot of people lied is all I'm saying. Anyways, neurologist Stephen Novella, president of the New England Skeptical Society, who has investigated the Warrens in the past, is far from convinced that they are real. He says that the Warrens are really good at telling ghost stories, and that you could do a lot of movies based on the stories they've spun, but there's absolutely no reason to believe there is any legitimacy to them. So they also inspired the 1979 film, The Amityville Horror, which has obviously spun many sequels and spin-offs and many things. I mean, I can't even tell you how many Amityville movies there are. Has anyone seen any of the recent Amityville movies?
Ryan Reynolds?
Ryan Reynolds, yeah.
I saw that one.
I thought it was good. I don't know.
I don't think I did see it.
He plays a very attractive psychopath. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
He's all right.
Picked Amityville, but yeah, I thought it was okay. Though I've only seen the original and that one. Now the original, I mean, is amazing, but from what I've heard, it's all been debunked. Which I'm noticing a theme throughout this season. I think we've debunked every episode we've done.
That might be true.
I will say that, I have my Scully pin with me at all times. No, I'm just kidding. Not all the time, but I am a major skeptic.
To the core. Yeah, same.
Yeah. So I was there was a 2017 Amityville movie with Bella Thorne in it, and I heard it was I heard mixed things about it. So I don't know. It's wild because that series has spun like I said, so many different things. But anyways, back to the Warrens. Andrea Perrone is actually the oldest of the 5 girls from the first movie, The Conjuring. And she says, she's now in her 50s, and she says that it's a beautiful tapestry with many elements of truth to it and some moments of fiction. So when Lorraine and her were helping inspire the movie, they claim that it's, on the up and up, and that everything was They fictionalized a little bit, but for the most part, it's true to the world, true to real life.
Did she get a book deal? She needs to corroborate that.
Well, so interesting that you bring up book deals, because that's what I found the most interesting when I was doing my research, is just about some of their weird things that have happened as they've made deals with people, and whether or not it's fiction or truth, and how that works with book deals and things like that. So there was a guy named Brittle, and he wrote a book called The Demonologist, which he was supposed to have the full rights to all of the Warrens' case files, and the couple was not allowed to make movie deals without his involvement. So then they obviously made these Conjuring movies, and he was not involved in those. I do believe maybe was involved in the Amityville horror movie, but specifically the Conjuring movies he was not involved with. And the Conjuring movies the franchise has earned Warner Brothers nearly $1 billion. And so now Brittle is backtracking a lot, because he has now reclassified The Demonologist as a work of fiction, so that it's an intellectual property that Warner Brothers has infringed upon.
Wow.
So
that kind of sounds like a good lawsuit. I don't know.
So
Yeah,
I've actually read it. I read The Demonologist, and it's okay. It's not bad, but this guy who wrote it reads kind of like an R.L. Stine book, but with way too many exclamation marks. Like, like, and there actually was a ghost, or like, and the lights went off, exclamation mark. Like, it's way too enthusiastic.
Now I kind of want to read it.
We do.
Like, this guy needs to chill. I don't know. But I can't imagine him like doing a screenplay, but it'd be like, oh, but I don't know. It's an all right book, but that is interesting how he's spinning it as fiction now.
Yeah, I think realizing that, because obviously he must not have truly had the rights to everything, or it's so hard to really have the rights to someone's life story and
their
all
work
that stuff.
too.
And so he's trying so hard to make a buck off of something that he feels like he has the right to, and so now he's even willing to say, oh, actually it's fiction, and
just kidding.
So I don't know. I think there's a lot of question marks around the Warrens. So I would say for me, it's pretty clear that Ed and Lorraine vastly overstated their contribution to the police investigations and like their study of the paranormal. There's been many testimonies of the people involved that like they were encouraged to fabricate the truth, and that a lot of the evidence was staged. Lorraine continues to hold up that it's scientific proof, but I think that a lot of people were encouraged to lie. So I found a quote that stood out to me in an article by Angie Berry for Criminal Element, and she says, "The real-life Warrens are trauma vultures quick to latch on to anything that implies supernatural interference, while the movie Warrens are precious darlings with the love story for the ages."
Yeah,
I
true.
just really liked that particular quote. But yeah, I mean, that obviously I'm summing up the Warrens very quickly, but I want to kind of get your opinions. What do you guys, is this your jam? Do you believe in this stuff? Do you think they were onto something? Are you also a skeptic like myself? What do you guys think of the Warrens?
I feel like this is the kind of stuff I always want to believe in so badly, but I'm like you, Liz. I'm a skeptic. Like, there's usually an explanation for everything, and that's there's been so many stories. I can't think of a specific example right now, but I have read some about the Warrens and just examples of them stretching the truth or, changing stories. So
for me, the bigger question is not, were they, like, I think, did they believe what they were doing? Because I feel like sometimes when you get into something, like weird things will happen that have explanations, but they will overlook that because they are so into, it's not psychosis, I don't know, like I don't know the right term for it, but they're so sure of what they're doing that they will make it fit their narrative. And so I feel like maybe they didn't do it intentionally.
Maybe it started as something they genuinely believed in and then realized where it could take them, and that's when it kind of flipped for them.
Right. Have you guys seen the movie The Last Exorcism? It's about a guy who does exorcisms, but he's like, he knows he's not doing a real exorcism, and he was gonna expose himself, but he was actually benefiting people while he did it, because when he would go, he would perform this thing, and then like the person, like psychosomatically or whatever, would be better after. So it had some beneficial effect, even though he was a liar and a charlatan. So it reminds me of this, though. Like if they got so deep into it that they thought like, oh yeah, this is what we're doing, and then after years, they would start seeing things that weren't there.
Which, I mean, it does sound like from some of the daughters' perspectives, they obviously still have a good relationship with the Warrens. And so maybe because of that, like you could say, okay, well, whatever it was that was affecting this family, maybe they helped in some other way, which I'm cool with that. I don't necessarily want to believe that Ed and Lorraine were like evil and like trying to like prey on people. I mean, obviously I said that quote where they are vultures, but like I don't totally think that. I just think that they got really caught up in believing something that maybe has better explanations than paranormal, but I don't know. Jill, I have to ask, what's your opinions on paranormal stuff? Because I know, like, I've mostly only talked to you, I think, about like, I don't think I've ever talked to you about paranormal horror, I guess, and most of the stuff you've done, I don't think you've done a lot of paranormal. Well, I guess Call Girls kind of, I don't know. But yeah, anyways, what's your opinion on paranormal stuff? Are you a believer? Are you a skeptic?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like Kaleigh, where I really want to believe, and I've gone to all these like haunted supposed places and think I want to see something, but I'd probably freak the fuck out if I did. But my interest in like movies like that, I feel like for a while a lot of horror movies or like supernatural paranormal horror movies became all about the like ghost hunting, and that's when I really got bored. Like, just tell us like the ghost story, not make it all about the ghost hunting. Weird, Conjuring does have the ghost hunting, but it didn't bother me. Maybe it's because it's from a different era, like modern ghost hunting. I just kind of like roll my eyes at it. But I am in general, I think supernatural elements in films. Like, I don't know if I'm super attracted to like real stories myself as a director that are supposed real stories. But I do like ghost stories, and I think there's lots of supernatural elements to a lot of things.
Yeah, I think part of why I think The Conjuring is successful in that too is because I still think it's a character piece. Like, the movie is not just, oh, there's a spooky ghost. Like, it's like, how is it affecting this family? And, bringing in the Warrens, who are these compassionate, kind people, and like how they connect to this family. I mean, it's kind of like, to me, like that's why Poltergeist is interesting. It's like those movies are about families and then how a paranormal thing affects a family versus just, oh, let's find the spooky ghost and be scared, So that's why I think it's a successful movie. So, well, that's kind of all I have for The Conjuring. So, Andrea, I'm real excited to hear about this movie that I really didn't know anything about it till you mentioned it. So.
Yeah, same.
So I do want to mention the Conjuring universe has affected me in such a way that I do cosplay Annabelle.
Nice.
And she looks nothing like the actual Annabelle doll.
Right. Isn't the Annabelle...
She's a Raggedy Ann. Yeah. But it's a fantastic costume piece, so I had to insert that because that's how much I love those movies. So my pick, I'm going to try not to ramble too long so we got a lot to get through, but is The Serpent and the Rainbow, which was a 1988 horror film directed by Wes Craven, and it was Bill Pullman's first starring role. I actually had not seen this movie until I started researching for this episode, because I was like, okay, I've seen all of the the horror movies that are based on true stories that are like super popular. So I wanted to explore a little bit. And then I also have an axe to grind with the word zombie. At the Kansas City Sci-Fi Convention Conquest a few years ago, I was in a panel, and a guy was talking about how he talked about George Romero arguing that he did not have any zombies in his movies. They were ghouls. And he hated people calling them zombies in Night of the Living Dead, and it was like a huge thing. But finally he gave in and was just like, forget it, pop culture has gone crazy and they are zombies. So zombie actually originated in the voodoo beliefs of the Caribbean and West Africa, referring to a body that was revived and then enslaved by a sorcerer, which just isn't your typical just popped out of the ground, gonna eat your brains kind of thing. And there was a way back to the 1930s, Zora Neale Hurston was an anthropological pioneer, actually went to Haiti, studied voodoo society, and wrote a book called Tell My Horse, and was convinced zombies are real, but couldn't find any sort of medicine or powder that existed at that time. And if it did exist, she failed to obtain it. So in the movie, I don't know, have any of you guys seen it?
I have. It's been a while though, but it's pretty trippy. It's good.
I have.
Yeah, I watched about half of it, if I'm being honest. I tried.
No, I feel like it is a little, like, some of the scenes are a little out there. It's not a perfect film by any means, but I think it's a must watch for anybody who likes horror, is a zombie aficionado, or appreciates Wes Craven in any capacity. Because I think I was surprised. So the movie is based on a book by the person who actually went to Haiti and experienced these things. And kind of the outlandish things of the movie that I thought were going to be like fictional actually happened.
Wow.
So starting off, in 1962, a man named Clervis Narcisse went into an emergency room. He got sick. He died. He was declared dead, held in cold storage for 20 hours, and was buried. Well, then, in 1980, a man walked into a village in central Haiti and approached a peasant woman and identified himself as this woman's brother, Clervius. He introduced himself using a boyhood nickname and mentioned facts that only intimate family members would know, otherwise she wouldn't have believed him because she saw him get buried. So this part is true. This is a part they introduce in the movie. And the biggest part of all of this was there were many doctors at the hospital he was at, but one of them was an American on staff. And so it was a documented death, where apparently in Haiti that was not always the case. That there was actually a certificate of death, there were tests done to make sure the person was dead. And then when he came back, they could confirm that it was actually this man. So he was fully conscious of his burial, which was the other crazy thing.
That's my worst nightmare.
Yeah, like
Are you kidding
he
me?
was like paralyzed. He couldn't speak or move.
No.
So it gets creepy because he had a scar on his right cheek that he said was caused by a nail driven through the casket.
Nope. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. That's horrifying.
Yeah. So what kind of like I think attracted me to this is like there's not just Haitians, but there's a lot of communities that believe in zombies or these kind of zombies. And the claim is not unique. So there was a Haitian-born psychiatrist that had been investigating all kinds of zombie reports, and he couldn't find any kind of scientific explanation. He was convinced that this phenomena was real, but he couldn't figure out what was happening. So he reached out to some people in New York, and surprise, surprise, there were people in America that thought they could make money off of whatever drug or herb was being used in this process.
Classic Americans.
Right. It was like, okay, there's medical potential here if we can figure out how to slow somebody's metabolism down so low that we think they're dead. So this led to getting funds to send somebody to investigate. And that's where Harvard ethnobotanist Wade Davis came in. And he's the one that wrote the book. I started the book this week just because I got so wrapped up in this. And it is not your typical scientific journal dry thing. It's actually pretty good. I'm excited to finish it. But I was surprised at how many parallels there were from the book to the movie. So in the beginning of the movie, he's out on an expedition, and there's like a wild cat that comes out and kind of like leads him to a main road and saves his life. That part was true. And then there was another part where he befriends a local, trying to find a good word for it, Haitian, like he's kind of like a gang leader, like a very scary person, but he was also a witch doctor that he goes up against to get the quote-unquote zombie powder that he obtains. And same thing from the true story from the book to the movies. He meets with this guy. He owns a bar and a bordello, and he's like, hey, like, I have powerful but anonymous interests in New York, and we're going to give you a lot of money if you'll show me how this powder's made. So there's days spent of him watching the guy gather ingredients. But as he's watching it, he's like, okay, this is like BS. Like the stuff you're putting together is not going to do this, but he lets him do his thing. And there is a lot of like ethical condemnation of him because I guess they actually like dug up a child and like ground bones up in this whole process. But I'm like, hey, you know, you're in Haiti, you're finding the zombie powder, like
do what you gotta do.
That's pretty brutal though.
So he gets this fake powder. A few days later, he goes back to the bar. In the movie, he puts the powder into a like a glass, and it looks like Alka-Seltzer, I'm guessing is what they used, and it drinks it. But in real life, he pretended to pour it onto his palm, and the guy's like freaking out, you're gonna be a dead man. And obviously he wasn't, so he was impressed by his bravado, and then from that point on actually agreed to show him how this powder was made. His research has been widely criticized. I think I absolutely believe that a lot of the zombieism in Haiti is political, and I think the government does it to people. Like, I think that was like an undertone of the movie, because there's a guy that's like a police captain or military leader that basically tells that like people, if they don't listen, they're gonna disappear and become slaves. That this was being done to people. But there's a lot of different things and elements from the powders they've gotten. He ended up getting 5 samples of different powders, and in the end, his main thing in his hypothesis was that it was tetrodotoxin, which is like pufferfish poison, along with a couple of other things that would bring on symptoms of like being paralyzed. But then you have to have something after the person wakes up. So they give that to them. They look like they're dead. And then you have my favorite thing of the whole story is the datura plant, which apparently grows everywhere. But in Haiti, it's called encombre zombie, or the zombie's cucumber. And it produces trance-like symptoms, and if part of regular meals, could cause a maintained stupor.
let's try that out.
Yeah.
So,
let's give it a go.
The movie has some pretty fantastical scenes to it. A couple of fan service moments. But overall, I think it's a really good movie. There's also a newer movie that premiered at Sundance a few years ago called Zombie Child that relates to this story that I have not watched yet. But I want to, just because I'm so obsessed with this story now. There was another thing that I highly recommend that everybody go to YouTube and watch. It's Joe Bob Briggs' Monster Vision episode where he interviewed Wes Craven about this movie.
Oh, cool.
And they discussed they could only film in Haiti for 11 days because there was so much political unrest and it was dangerous, so they had to move to the Dominican Republic. But they had weird shit happening on the show, like on the set too. 2 actors had visions. One of the writers interviewed somebody about making zombie powder and told him that he wanted to be indoctrinated into voodoo. And so the guy said, "Oh, you will be." So for like a couple weeks, he didn't know his wife and kids. Like he was like completely out of his mind. Got back to LA and then woke up one day and had no idea what had happened to him.
That's
weird.
Yeah.
They had 3 times where people on their crew were nearly stoned to death for various reasons. And of course, the Catholic Church was not a fan of the movie being made, but this was at this time Wes Craven's first time making a movie out of the US. So it was quite the adventure to get kicked out of Haiti.
All of this just sounds like a bad acid trip. Like
it really does.
So like, overall, I think it's a really good movie. I think it's one of the ones of Wes Craven's that a lot of people haven't watched.
Yeah, I forgot that he directed it.
And I think it's one of the few movies that actually addresses like true zombieism.
Mm-hmm.
So are you guys ready to make some zombie powder?
Where's the zombie cucumber?
Yeah, where do we get the zombie cucumber?
I can Google the datura plant and we can figure this out.
And make some.
You're gonna grow it, please.
Yes, some sushi with it or something.
So, we can put it with the ranch. If you serve it with puffer fish,
dip it in ranch. Yeah, I like that. No, I don't think I want puffer fish. Isn't it like certain where you can eat puffer fish, right? But you have to make sure that they've been properly like drained. I don't know.
Yeah, it can kill you.
Not in them anymore.
Like, if it's not prepared correctly, it will kill you.
See, that's scary.
Yeah.
I don't want to eat puffer fish.
No, but you'll eat the zombie cucumber.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page when I cook dinner.
And now is where I talk, apparently.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So
stoked.
I think you like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre a little bit, right?
Hold on. I'd like to first start by saying I don't have as a professional of a lecture prepared for you all.
That's okay.
It's all right.
Yes. If you know me at all, you might know the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The original is my favorite horror movie of all time. And it is kind of an ironic one to bring up on here because it's not truly based on a real story. If everyone remembers, there's the scroll at the beginning of the movie that tells you it is based on a true story, that this did happen, but it did not. And people understandably believed that it did, and that was part of what really freaked people out so much when it first released in 1974. The truth behind it is just that Leatherface really as a character is loosely based on Ed Gein, and the way they designed the house is inspired by Ed Gein's house, I would say. I think a lot of us know about Ed Gein. He's kind of like one of the most infamous serial killers that really we don't know if he was technically a serial killer. His backstory, I think so many serial killers were based on him, or just the psyche base. His mother was a religious fanatic who taught him sex was evil, and it's much deeper than that, but that's the topical version of it. It made him obsessed with that and sexual anatomy, sex in general. He obsessed and started with like medical books. That wasn't enough for him. He started robbing graves in town. To our knowledge, we only know that he killed 2 people, and that's why I feel like he's not really like all the serial killers we've heard about, really, that got away with this for so many years, killed like a dozen people that were very smart. He really wasn't that type. He wasn't like smart and planned out. The second lady he killed was the hardware store owner. He was the last person to buy something there. Like, he wasn't trying to hide his steps at all. And so I feel like he's not really that traditional psychopathic, like super smart, super manipulative type of person. And so when the police went to his house, they found that woman strung up like a gutted animal and just body parts all over the house, like, which this is where I think a lot of the inspiration for Texas Chainsaw comes. There are like, they say there were like chairs upholstered with skin, bowls to be made of human skulls, like a corset made out of a woman's chest.
The belt of nipples has my attention.
Oh my god.
Yes.
And what I think is fascinating is that this like idea has inspired like countless, and I couldn't even think of half of them, characters, because it's just this idea of like wearing skin, and it's like this mommy issue thing that we saw in Psycho, in Leatherface, in Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs. I think Maniac is like him too. Like Claire in The Stylist is the same type of character. And I feel like I've seen these types. Like, I remember in one of the early American horror stories, there was a skin-wearing killer. It's insane that this one guy has inspired so much art, and it's not to say inspired in a good way. That sounds insanely horrible.
No, it's accurate.
I think what's fascinating is that with all of this kind of stuff is that how someone is raised and how much. I mean, it's obvious, of course, how you're raised is going to affect who you become, but like that something like this did this to this person, that kind of repression made them that mentally ill. And that kind of stuff fascinates me on just a psychological level, not because there's a lot of the like serial killer fans in our community, and I think that is bordering on being like just inappropriate. It's like, this is not fun, supposed to be funny. This is real. Like, I've been to the town where Ed Gein lived, and they're really not happy with people coming there for that reason. And it's because people go there and they leave like fake brains on his grave and stuff, and they treat it like it's a movie when this was real. And these like half of this town's family was dug up by this man. But I think it's important to remember with this stuff, and it's I think a hard thing to do when you base a horror movie on something real, is still being sensitive to it, not just exploiting something because it's scary. But yeah, I don't even know where I ended on that. You guys talk about this.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean, I think that some people can be so far removed from characters or inspiration because, you know, that is like, it is so horrific. It can't almost be real. And so I've never been into that kind of like appeal, I guess. Like I go to haunted places and stuff, but I'm not going to go someplace like take a photo in front of a location that had like a mass shooting or, you know, something like awful and horrific happened there. It's almost like it's very disrespectful to the dead, and it glamorizes like a monster and a terrible person. So there's like this weird kind of fine line to walk, especially as a horror fan. I can imagine as like a creator too.
Yeah.
Marisa, that totally reminds me of what Liz was talking about when we were talking about burials with the sky burials, and was that Tibet? And like people would go and take photos of the corpses and stuff.
Yeah.
Like crosses a line that.
Well, yeah, and we kind of talked about it in our Stoll, Kansas episode too. I mean, obviously Stoll, Kansas is a myth. I mean, you know, it's a story. You know, it's not really necessarily based on true things. But like this town has now been so affected by people that are obsessed with going there. And so I can only imagine the like other level if it's like not only are we annoyed that you're coming here and like being, you know, ruining our space and like trampling stuff and breaking things and all this, but now you're coming here because we had a tragic event happen here that like some of us have been affected by. And it's just you know, I wish humanity was a little bit better sometimes.
I think there's a line to it, like you know, like I feel like it was talked about a lot, these people taking pictures. I don't know if that's what you're talking about in the like Holocaust cemetery. I think there's something to be said about being interested in going to these places and like feeling it and being respectful than a difference in like going there and taking a picture and being like, I'm here where whoever murdered people.
Well, yeah, and leaving brains on, like you said, leaving brains out and stuff. And it's like, when you're actually, because that's the thing with Stoll, Kansas, is that people were vandalizing that cemetery and like doing horrible things. And so then this town kept having to clean up after people. And so that's where I think it, you know, you are jumping over the line. You know, I mean, like you're, if you're going somewhere because you are truly, you know, like interested in something and you find some sort of like, you know, you want to study and be like a scholar of that topic or whatever, and you're getting actual information, you're paying your respect to it. That's one thing, because obviously we have like Holocaust museums and we have, you know, things that are contributed to our history, and that's good. But it's just, you just have to be, I think you bring up a good point, Jill, of just like making sure you definitely are on the respectful side of that. And like, if people, you know, if someone doesn't want you to go in a certain area, don't go there, you know, like don't pass a line, don't go onto someone's personal property, you know, like make sure that you follow the rules, because that's when it starts to get really frustrating.
Well, I will say that as a Texan, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is really big down here, obviously, and that's kind of like what we're known for in the film world to an extent. And the horror scene down here, like going to the gas station is always really fun. You can go to the original gas station a little bit out of Austin, and it looks exactly the same. There's like a shop inside. They have the original van out there. There's barbecue. But there's no like homage to Ed, you know, Gein or however you pronounce his name. It's more so like the filmmaking and the characters and the genre. And when you go to other film locations, though, there's a house, the Hewitt house from I think the one with Jessica Biel in it, the remake from like 2007 or something, and that one is really intense because it's this really big plot of land, big colonial. You can't walk up to it. It's fenced off. There's floodlights. They even print off a piece of paper, and it's like, if you're here because for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, then read this. And it goes over the history of the house, and it reiterates, like, this is not based on a true story. These people didn't live here. This is the history of our house. Like, you will be shot if you trespass. Like, they're not very open or welcoming to it at all. And, but there are a lot of people who still think that this is a true story. And then there's other people who appreciate it from like a filmmaking perspective and love Tobe Hooper because he's an Austinite and Texan. So, he's really popular in the film scene and has done a lot of really cool work here in Texas. So there's kind of like, I would say tourists who come here are the ones who don't really know that much about it. But like everyone here who lives in Texas or is a Texan kind of like has that respect, and it's like a fun thing to do, like go to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre film locations and restaurants and bars and stuff. But there's no like glamorizing it.
Like, as a Texan, does the town that dreaded sundown get the same sort of respect, or not respect, fanfare, or like, do people come to Texarkana to check that out, or is that not?
I don't really know. I mean, that's never really been a big one for me. Maybe there's some people, I feel like that's a little bit like lesser known or a little bit more of a deep cut than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, especially since there were so many, like that built such a big franchise.
Right.
I'm sure there's some people who might, but there's not nearly as big of a draw. And then Texarkana, there's not a lot of cool shit to do around there anyways. It's like, if you want to go there, like you kind of go there for like a couple of things. Like, I don't think there's like a lot of stuff to do there. Whereas Austin and the Hill Country, there's more things to do around town that's worth making the trip, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't think it's nearly as popular as the Texas Chainsaw locations, and they totally lean into it too. Like the gas station they have, you can stay out there in cabins. There's in Kingsland, which is like the original house, there's you can stay out there too, not in the house, but they have little like it's kind of like an Airbnb over there, but the food there is actually really good, and it's not as like gimmicky as the gas station, but it's definitely like a part of our culture in a cinematic sense that people embrace and enjoy. But there's never any like, oh, let's talk about the real inspiration and tack that up on the walls. It's all like strictly movie based, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Which is nice. We're not assholes. Most of us.
I've been to the house. It's awesome, and stayed in one of those cabins.
Cool.
I also think Chainsaw probably doesn't have that. Like, it wouldn't have a lot of reference to what it's based on because it's just barely based on something that's real.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Jill started us off on serial killers or murders, so I'm going to go into one of my personal favorite films of all time that's based on a real-life serial killer. Well, the film is my favorite in general. It just happens to be based on a serial killer. It is David Fincher's Zodiac, which came out in 2007. Screenplay was written by James Vanderbilt, and the screenplay was based on the 1986 nonfiction book by Robert Graysmith, who became obsessed with the paper when he was a cartoonist at the San Francisco Chronicle, and just kind of happened to overhear what was going on and threw himself into the case. And it stars Mark Ruffalo, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Robert Downey Jr. How do you guys feel about the Zodiac? I think you've all seen it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know more about this movie than I do the actual Zodiac case. So I'm curious to hear like how close it is, what happened, and I have questions about a scene when you get done. So
okay. So
one of my favorites, and I'm a Psycho Fincher fan. So hell yeah,
It's so good.
It's so. I feel like I just started rewatching it today because I knew we were recording, and I think every time I watch this movie, I fall in love with it more. Like, I love this movie so much. And actually, Andrea, from what I can tell, I did as much research as I could. It's obviously true crime's very popular in like influencing horror genre films. But David Fincher essentially is, nobody paid as much attention to detail as he did when it came to making the movie. He not only went to great lengths to ensure that the film was historically accurate, from recreating like the period accurate San Francisco to building sets that matched the actual real world counterparts, and he even dressed the murder victims in the clothes that they were wearing when they died.
Wow.
So
That's gnarly.
Fincher took it to this insane level. There's actually a really cool video. I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but this guy named Netzel, the video is called Zodiac: When Truth is Stranger Than Fiction. It's on YouTube. He layers Fincher's footage over real interviews from the eyewitnesses who were involved in the Zodiac killer in the 1960s. So it's like, it's actually incredible. Like the scene where he calls into the whatever news station, I can't remember the name of the show he calls into. But that almost word for word is exactly what the Zodiac killer said when he was on TV. So if you don't know anything about the Zodiac killer, he was linked to at least 5 murders in Northern California from 1968 to 1969, which is insane because it only took place over a year. And we talked a little before we started recording. There's so much information about the Zodiac killer, and most of his crimes took place in just a single year, or at least the crimes we know of. He made threats and taunted the police through letters that were sent to a local newspaper from 1969 to 1974, before he just abruptly stopped communication. In 1974, he just stopped sending letters. And despite intensive investigations, nobody has ever been officially arrested for the crimes. So it all starts August 1st in 1969. The San Francisco Examiner, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Vallejo Times-Herald each receive identical handwritten letters that begin, "Dear Editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman." The letters contain details from the Zodiac killer's murders that only the killer and the police could have known. And he then went on to threaten further attacks if the letters were not printed on the front page of the papers. Each letter was signed with a symbol of a circle with a cross through it, and they also each letter contained one part of a 3-part cipher that contained his identity. While Bay Area police departments and the FBI worked to track down the killer, a letter arrived at the San Francisco Examiner that began, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." It also described the murders in detail and taunted police for not having been able to crack the code he sent or to catch him. Several days after that, high school student Donald Hardin, high school student Donald and his wife Beth. Oh no, high school teacher. I left out a word. Oh my gosh. His wife Beth were able to solve the cipher. And part of it read, "I like killing people because it's so much fun." It read, "It's more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." So if you guys have seen the movie, you know that book, The Most Dangerous Game, or the short story, is referenced pretty frequently. 3 days after the 4th known Zodiac killing, which was the 1969 murder of cab driver Paul Stine, the San Francisco Chronicle, he wrote the San Francisco Chronicle again, claiming he was the one who did the murder, and written in the same print that the other letters contained was a piece of Paul's bloody shirt. So he had actually taken the time to cut a square of the taxi driver's shirt after killing him and saving it to put into the letter. At the end of the letter, the writer mused that he would next shoot out the tire of a school bus and pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. So that obviously sent police into a spiral. They were freaking out, thinking he was gonna kill a bunch of kids on a school bus. The Zodiac killer continued taunting his correspondence with Bay Area papers. which included more ciphers. He claimed to have committed several more murders and mocked the police for their inability to catch him. And in 1974, like I said earlier, the letters stopped. So, as far as the victims and attacks go, the first actually confirmed incident took place on December 20th of 1968, when 17-year-old David Faraday and his 16-year-old girlfriend Betty Lou Jensen were shot to death near their car at a remote spot on Lake Herman Road, on the outskirts of Vallejo. The morning of July 5th, 1969, Darlene Farron, age 22, and her boyfriend Mike Maggio, age 19, were sitting in a parked car in the similarly, I can't say that word, remote Vallejo location when they were approached by a man with a flashlight. The figure fired multiple shots at them, killing Farron and seriously wounding Maggio. Within an hour of the incident, a man called the Vallejo Police Department, giving them the location of the crime scene and claiming responsibility for both that attack and the 1968 murders of Faraday and Jensen. And if you've seen the movie, you know that's the opening scene of the movie. And in that video I mentioned earlier, they actually interview the 911 operator who took the call. And it's funny because she's obviously an older woman now, and she talks specifically about how he said goodbye. And if you remember in the movie, he says it very slowly. He kind of says goodbye after talking. And she says he actually did that.
That was one of my favorite parts of the movie, because it confused me at first, because like the girl driving was being so weird about like,
well, yeah, and he does say like, is that your husband?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, so that's like a great leeway into the truth. Like later on you find out that she may have known the killer.
Yes. But they, as far as I can tell, I didn't find a lot of information specifically about if she could have known the killer, but because Mike did survive the shooting, he was able to give a description of the killer, despite the flashlight being shined in his eyes. So that was kind of the first time they were able to get, you know, a profile sketch of the Zodiac killer made, was because of Maggio. But obviously they never identified him. Then on September 27th, 1969, young couple Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell were relaxing on an isolated part of the shore of Lake Berryessa in Napa County. He approached them wearing a hood and a shirt bearing a circle cross symbol. He tied them up before brutally stabbing them and scrawling a message for police on their car door and leaving the scene. So again, reading these murders and then comparing them to the scenes of the movies, it's actually super accurate, the way everything is depicted in the film. A lot of articles I was reading comparing the differences said this is probably one of the most accurate films that's based on a nonfiction story. So police are still left baffled. He then, after killing them, calls the Napa Police Department to claim responsibility. Shepard and Hartnell were both in critical condition, but they were alive when emergency services arrived. Shepard died of her injuries shortly after, but again, the male of the party survived. And then October 11th, 1969, the Zodiac killer claimed another life, shooting 29-year-old taxi driver Paul Stein in the San Francisco's Presidio Heights neighborhood. And it's interesting because I have read an interview with the family that saw the taxi driver get shot and the kids that were at the window seeing it happen. And again, it's pretty accurate. The kids
that was a pretty great scene too.
Yeah, the kids are saying, I don't know, he's just like a normal looking guy.
He's a guy.
Yeah, because they're from the window and it's dark and they probably couldn't see a lot and they're little, so they don't know necessarily to pay close attention to details when something like that's happening.
Yeah, that's another scene that like really like made me mad, because they were like, no, it was a black man like that was put out on the APB.
Yeah, and that's another thing too.
Like those cops drove by him and were like, yeah, we saw a guy with a crew cut like walking down the street.
And they were like, well, it was dark. And he's like, they would have been covered in blood. He would have been covered in blood. Like
they didn't even look at him. Yeah.
If you would have just stopped a second to look at him. So 5 other murders have been tentatively linked to the Zodiac Killer. The 1963 shooting of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards near Santa Barbara, and the 1966 stabbing death of college student Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside. Multiple descriptions have been given of the Zodiac Killer, but subsequently has never been identified. But there are a few main suspects, which I will go into in a moment. But one of the scenes in the movies that's kind of notoriously talked about is the car scene. Sorry, dog. The woman with her baby, and the guy kind of comes up on her really quickly, honking the horn, and tells her tire's loose, the lug nut's loose, so he offers to tighten it for her.
Yeah, that wasn't him, right?
So there's a lot of arguments, that it's not, and they do cover that in the movie, that there's a couple murders that he takes credit for, but any detail that he was able to give them was details that were reported in the newspaper. So there was, unlike his other murders that he had information that only him and the police would know, the car scene, he only had details that were directly printed in the article.
Right, but wasn't there some speculation too as to fake Zodiac correspondence happening, for people pretending they were him and claiming murders?
Yeah, so there are some people out there that believe that some of the calls or letters actually didn't come from him. They came from people that were trying to hop on the bagwagon, so to say.
What the fuck? That's so...
I know. Isn't that insane? Why would you want to... Why? But that's, there's those copycat murders in a lot of instances.
It's just the need for attention is so gross sometimes.
I know. So there are 3 main suspects. I'll start with 2 of them, and then we'll go to the most notorious one. But Earl Van Best Jr., in 2014, HarperCollins published The Most Dangerous Animal of All by Gary Stewart, in which he claims that his father, who was Earl Van Best Jr., who bears a very strong resemblance to the man in the police sketch, was the Zodiac Killer. So I think he has some loose-fitting timelines, and his dad basically looked like the police sketches, so he's claiming that his dad was the Zodiac Killer. Louis Myers is another person that came forward in 2014 to reveal that a friend named... another man came forward, in 2014 to reveal that a friend named Louis Myers had confessed to being the killer before his death in 2002. So certain events in Myers' history do line up with events in the Zodiac's timeline, but as with Allen and Van Best, there's no actual proof, which leads me to Arthur Lee Allen, who's prominently focused on in the movie. The big guy with the watch, and his sister and brother talk to him, or his sister-in-law and brother, spelling Christmas, Christmas, those kind of things. So the San Francisco Chronicle cartoon artist, Robert Graysmith, who wrote 2 separate works on the killer, the 1986 Zodiac, which the movie is based off, and the 2002 Zodiac Unmasked, ultimately identifying Arthur Lee Allen as the most likely suspect. Allen died in 1992 and was never conclusively connected to any of the murders.
So I did see something about the original victim that had been shot, that the girlfriend was freaked out about her husband following them. That her sister, remember the scene where she was in jail, and she was trying to remember the name of the weird guy that wouldn't leave the house, and that was Lee.
Yes.
Yeah, and then at the end of the movie, the guy was shown a photo lineup, and he picked him out, but he died before they could actually press charges. So that part of the movie was what I was curious about, how accurate that was, because that really leads you to believe that it was him.
Yeah, and I do think they take some, artistic liberties with that specific point, because Robert Graysmith really did believe Arthur Lee Allen was the killer.
So they wanted to veer it that way.
Yeah, so I think they try to focus ultimately on him because the movie is based on Graysmith's book, and that Lee was the person that he basically went to his grave believing was
but
the
I
one
think
who did it.
The scariest part of the entire movie for me was when he went to see his boss from the movie theater and they went into the basement.
Yes, I was just talking about that with someone when he's walking upstairs.
That was insane. And then in my back of my brain, I'm like, well, maybe they were in on it together.
I know. There's so many, like, that's what's fascinating about this specific story to me is, one, we'll probably never know who actually did it, but there's so many different, turns that this story could take. Was it one person? Was there multiple people who tried to step into the Zodiac's shoes?
Is it in the ciphers?
So last thing about the Zodiac, in 2020, more than 50 years after the events, Codebreakers finally solved the Zodiac's cipher, and the message read, "I hope you're having lots of fun trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show," which brings up a point about me. "I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise. All the sooner because I know I now have enough slaves to work for me where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise. So they are afraid of death, and I am not afraid because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise death." And that's the pretty accurate telling. If you haven't seen The Zodiac, I highly recommend watching it.
I need to rewatch that. It's been a while. Because onto more fucked up people and murderers. I rewatched Hounds of Love recently, and have y'all seen that before? Are y'all familiar?
Yeah, I have not.
I literally have 20 minutes left. I tried to watch it before we recorded today, but I just ran out of time. But I have 20 minutes left, so we'll see. I think it's about to get real effed up.
Yeah. So it's...
I mean, it is effed up.
It's pretty messed up. So Hounds of Love is a directorial debut by Ben Young. He directed it and wrote the screenplay for it. I think it came out in like 2017. It's an Australian film, and it's based on the real-life murderous couple, David and Catherine Burney. I may have butchered their last name, but I don't care because these people fucking sucked. They're terrible. So they lived in Perth, Australia, and in the film, it stars Emma Booth, Ashley Cummings, and Stephen Curry, which all three give phenomenal performances. And the crimes that are performed, they're based on the crimes that are known as the Morehouse murders, which corresponds to the house on Moore Street where David and Catherine lived. A little bit about their background. David grew up in a very large family, lots of physical abuse, sexual abuse. There were lots of alcoholism, drug abuse, instances of incest as well. So he had a very traumatic childhood growing up, and he met Catherine when they were teenagers, and they were together for a little bit. They were on and off for a while. She came back to be with him as an adult after she got divorced from her first husband. And in the 80s, over the span of 5 weeks, they together abducted 5 women aged between 15 and 31. 4 of them were killed. One of them, the last the last girl that they abducted, was able to escape and get the police and hold them accountable and get them arrested. I will say that there is a huge trigger warning for this content and for seeing Hounds of Love. It's a fantastic movie, but the subject matter is really intense. They were serial rapists. First, I want to talk about if you can stomach it, like the movie itself, the way that it's made is actually really well done. The way that time is captured. So it follows the story of one girl, played by Emma Booth, who's a teenager. She sneaks out of her house to go to a party, and the couple, roll up on her at night while she's walking there alone, and they offer her a joint. And then they say, "Oh, well, we left it at our house. If you want, you can call a taxi from our house and we can just sell it to you there." So she gets in the car with them. They go take her to the house. They end up drugging her and kidnapping her and holding her hostage. I forget how long it is in the film, but subsequently they, sexually assault her together. And it's really, 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 really intense. But some of the ways that Ben Young goes about capturing this story in order to kind of show that he's a talented filmmaker is his use of time. Like there's this slow motion and stop freeze frame aspect to the film that kind of just puts you in this fucked up, like, mental space that like time doesn't exist, and there'll be these kids playing outside jump roping and then they're all just frozen, or someone's mowing their lawn and they're just frozen with the leaves of grass flowing up in the air. So it's interesting that like some people just go about their day, and then other people, who are in situations where they're held captive, maybe next door, no one knows, they could just be tied to a bed or sitting in a chair, and 1 minute could feel like an eternity, or vice versa. So it's really interesting how he kind of approaches time in those like certain scenes, and also like tension as well. The two characters, David and Catherine, I think they have different names in the film, but they have this very toxic relationship. She wants to have a baby. He thinks that by kidnapping these girls and taking care of a dog is like a way to prove that she's capable of being a mother. There's all this jealousy between the captive women that, they kill and torture and rape in the film. And there's this like weird dynamic that between them as well as the captive. So it's really interesting, but based on the film is actually not as bad as they were in real life. So the cases that happened in real life, they only, I think, took 2 of the girls back to the house, but a regular thing for them to do was to pick up girls who were stranded on the side of the road, whether they were waiting for their car broke down or waiting for a bus, or hitchhiking. So young women on the side of the highway being vulnerable and being alone, especially being a couple. Catherine used her, feminine, like, I guess, power to sort of make them feel comfortable and safe. They also had a baby seat in the back of the car sometimes to make them feel like that they're parents and, like they wouldn't hurt you. But so multiple women that they picked up were strangled with a nylon cord, raped, and then stabbed. They were also, 3 of them were buried in a shallow grave in a national park close by. So they would impulsively just pick someone up over this time frame, rape them, kill them, and then bury their body out in the middle of the woods. So
please tell me these people were executed.
Unfortunately they weren't. The girl Catherine, I think she
Sorry, I don't want to be pro
but
they should be.
Yeah, I mean there are some similarities to the cases. Like one of the victims was 15 years old, Susanna Candy. She was taken back to their house where she was raped and chained to their bed, assaulted. They tried to force sleeping pills down her throat to calm her down, and then Catherine got jealous, and so David was saying how she should profess his love to her by killing the girl. Like they had this really, really crazy dynamic and power struggle both with their victims and each other. And so she complied and killed Susanna Candy while David watched. So they were both murders, but usually David did most of the killing, I suppose. But and then they buried her in the state forest as well. So in the film, there is an aspect of like forcing the victim to take sleeping pills. They also, in order to like kill them, instead of like the female wanting to do it herself, she was like, here, just overdose on pills kind of thing. Another similarity in the film to the real life murders was that they forced another victim to contact her home, call her mother, and tell her that she was staying over at a friend's house because she had been drinking. But this was actually the last case, I believe. Kate Moore. She's 17 years old. So she was abducted. They hit her over the head, took her back to the house, chained her, and then said that so when she called her mother to say that she had too much to drink and was staying at a friend's, her mother kind of caught on because her daughter wasn't a drinker. So there's kind of a similar situation in the film when the girl, who's played by Emma Booth, she writes a letter to her parents and her boyfriend saying, she's met someone else, she's run away, don't contact her. And she kind of like put a little code in the message so they could eventually find her at the house. And so there are some kind of similarities there. When Kate Moore was rescued, ultimately she got away because there was a drug deal going on, and Catherine went to the door to answer it but forgot to chain Moore to the bed. So she escaped by climbing through a window by breaking the lock. And when she went, this is really messed up too, when she went to the police didn't believe her. Eventually, she got out, she ran to a nearby store that was like a vacuum cleaner store, and they took her to the police. The police didn't believe her, but there was one female constable there who was 22, and that was the only person who believed her, was this young woman in the police force. And so she was like, okay, let's go and look at it. And then she was, gave them descriptions of the couple. She said that they watched the film Rocky on VHS and described the house, and the only reason that they really believed her was because the police also found the VHS copy of Rocky in the VCR. So
wow.
Yeah, so they were arrested. They gave conflicting information during their interviews. They denied meeting her. But then David later said that Moore had come to their house voluntarily to engage in consensual sex, but they eventually confessed and also told the police where they could go and dig up the rest of the bodies, that there were 4 shallow graves in the national park. So I believe that David initially, I think he passed away. He was found dead in his cell and was 54 years old. He hung himself from an air vent using some sort of cord.
Good.
And yeah, I mean, it's such like a little bitch move, I think we've talked about this before, like when violators and abusers kill themselves, especially in prison after he took responsibility. He said, he admitted to everything, but yeah, he killed himself. And then, let's see, I think Catherine is actually still alive, and she has been incarcerated and works as like a prison librarian. Yeah. So I think she's actually still in prison. There hasn't been anything else that's coming up with her, but I think she comes up for parole every 3 years or something like that. But yeah, so one survivor. The film is just really, really well made, but again, it is really intense subject matter, and I'm actually glad that they approached it the way that they did, because had they gone about this based on the reality of these crimes, I don't think I could have watched it.
Right. Yeah.
It's just it's really intense. So
yeah, it definitely has mixed reviews on Letterboxd. So you know,
I guess you
because
have
there's
to be in
people
the
that
right
hate it.
mindset to watch that.
Yeah.
One thing
Yeah, I
I
mean,
was thinking when you said she's still in jail, have you guys watched Wentworth?
I don't think so.
It's like an Australian prison drama, but I'm like, oh god, that bitch is in that. Because there's a lot of shady characters that are locked up in Australia, and really creepy.
Wentworth.
But it's a good show. If you guys liked Orange is the New Black, it's better.
Okay.
I like Orange is the New Black. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of promise for the director. Like, I think that, you know, I'd be interested in other stuff that he did down the road. And it's interesting too, like having that kind of a film from a male perspective. I think it was good. Because that can also be a really big factor when you're telling stories like this, you know? So
How recent was it?
2017 and 16.
Well, like the real event to the
17,
movie.
yeah.
The murders happened in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's been some time. Like, the other thing I think you always worry about is like the actual people that were involved or family members. Like,
right, yeah.
That's a really odd place to be.
Well, yeah, you wonder, I think, like, probably a good way to just kind of wrap this up is when you think about the impact that these situations have on people. Obviously, they're interesting enough that somebody wants to make a film about them. But then making sure that you do it respectfully, it's such a fine line, obviously. We've kind of talked about that. But I think, like, you know, like I look at a lot of true crime stuff that's come out recently. Like there was that one on Netflix called An American Murder Next Door.
Oh God, yeah.
I didn't finish it.
Yeah, it's hard to watch. But you know, the girlfriend of the guy, like apparently she Googled like book deals for like another, because there was another case that was similar where a guy murdered his family and had a mistress. And like, so she was looking up like if that woman had gotten book deals and stuff. And we're in a weird timeline where like
you can find out everything.
Know,
yeah.
Well, yeah, people know like, okay, if this story is interesting enough, like you know, I mean, you've got the guy that wrote the demonologist book that's like trying to make money. You know, now we're in this world where people know that if the story is interesting enough, then somebody will want to make a movie. And so how can I then profit off of that? And that's where it gets really gross. And I don't know. I think that there is some truly good art that comes out of tragedy. And I appreciate that part of it. And that's why I think I'm drawn to some things that are based on true stories.
Yeah, agreed.
You know,
I think all art is inspired by something. I mean, whether you're, you know, sitting at a cafe and you see something or you hear a song or you have an event in your life, it's like, I think you said, like, if they're respectful of it, if it is an actual real event, that has a huge impact on how it portrays on screen. Versus, and there's a big thing with inspired by and based on too, like that's a huge divide, I think, in this genre.
Oh, yeah, I mean, like, Jill, like, your story is, like, inspired by, I mean, very loosely, I would write. I mean, like, as far as the stylist goes, it's kind of, like, loosely inspired by...
Yeah, it's more inspired by Leatherface than it is Ed Gein.
Right.
Well, and I think, you know, with Hounds of Love, there actually is a lot of emotion there. The way that they play on emotion is very interesting. And the end actually made me like tear up. It's actually like a very emotional ending and like pretty damn cathartic. And it's interesting too, because these stories are the most terrifying for me as a horror fan. You know, give me like monsters, paranormal stuff, creature features, like, you know, whatever, that's fun. But like this kind of stuff that's based on real life cases or murderers terrifies me because it's plausible and it happens. So there's this notion of if this could be you or someone you love, or if this could be happening in the house or the apartment next to you. People come up to the door and they're like, what was all that screaming? It kind of like reminds you in a sense to like listen to your gut. Don't get in the car with people you don't know, no matter how nice they seem. If something's weird, even if they're your neighbor, like there's this very interesting approach to resiliency, instinctivism, and just like your survival tendencies and fight or flight. Like there's this one scene that's really intense where she's sitting in the bathtub and she's being held at knife point. And it's just the girl, like the woman captive and the captor, and the window is open. And she's just looking out the window, like out of her side eye, and it's just such a calm moment. There's hardly any music really in the film. And the tension that boils there, it's just like, so are you going to attack her? Like, what are you going to do? You have these little moments, these little literal windows of time that you could either make a run for it or fight or comply. And it's just such a crazy mind game. So there's like a very interesting psychological level to these films as well.
Well, Jill, before you leave us, would you like to tell us just where we can find you, what's coming up, anything exciting going on? We want to know all about it.
Heck yes. You can find me at Jill Sixx on all places, and The Stylist at The Stylist Film on all social medias. And we have a couple of film festivals coming up. We're making our French premiere at the end of January at the Gevargizian, I am not saying that right, Fantasy Film Festival. And then we play at the Final Girls Berlin Film Festival next month in February.
Awesome.
And like you guys mentioned, it's going to release in the US and UK via Arrow Video on their streaming channel on March 1st, Arrow Player. And then in June, it'll come out on Blu-ray and VOD and all kinds of things.
So exciting.
Yeah, it's so cool.
I also was curious, is 42 Counts available for people to stream?
Yeah, it's actually streaming on Alter, the YouTube channel. They release short films. They've got 3 of my shorts now. How many? I don't remember.
So everybody should go to Alter and check those out.
But yes, watch them all on Alter. They're awesome.
So, what has you ladies spellbound this week? Kaleigh, what have you been digging on? You said you were watching a lot of TV. What have you been watching?
So I mentioned to you guys earlier, I've been trapped at home for the last 10 days due to a COVID scare. So I've been self-isolating. So I've been looking for shows or movies that either I'm familiar with or something that I can kind of be in and out of if I'm tired or something. So first of all, I rewatched 30 Rock, which I love. But I also recently started Good Girls, which I think is an NBC show. It's on Netflix, or the first 2 seasons are. And it's actually I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because it is just an NBC show, but it's pretty well done, and it's kept me entertained in my quarantine the last week. But it has Retta, Mae Whitman, and Christina Hendricks, I think, from Mad Men. Is that her name? Christina Hendricks? Mm-hmm. And it just basically focuses on 3 women who are moms who find themselves in a terrible situation. Retta's daughter needs a new kidney. One of their husbands is having an affair and they're about to lose their house, and the other one is just a single mom. And they decide to rob a grocery store, and it sends them down this kind of it's a dark comedy, this fun kind of crime spree that they maybe didn't mean to get too far into. But I would recommend it if you just need something fun to watch that's a little dark humor.
Nice. So for me, I don't think we talked about this on the podcast. I think it was like off the podcast. But I did see Promising Young Woman, and I loved it. I know, Marisa, you said you kind of felt like mixed about it. You weren't sure. I don't remember exactly what you said, but like,
I mean, I liked it. I didn't love it, but you know,
I also saw that movie. There were things I really liked, and there were things where I was like, I don't know if I loved it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hard movie to sit with, but I don't know. It was very powerful for me. I really liked it. I loved the performances. I thought everyone was like really good.
I agree with that.
And even like the dudes were just really good at being shitty. So I really liked that movie. I don't know if you haven't seen it in a theater. I have no idea when you'll be able to watch it. I know that's kind of tricky right now for a lot of people, but
I think it's going to be
manicure.
It'll be streaming soon.
Yeah, also your manicure is sick, Liz.
Yes, I got the manicure that she has in the film because I was like, I liked it that much, y'all. I loved it.
I mean, I did really enjoy it. I was pleasantly surprised by it. I guess I expected.
I haven't seen it yet, and I don't like to pin women against each other. But how does it compare with Revenge? Because I keep hearing it get compared to that movie.
It is nothing like Revenge. I mean,
I love Revenge.
I love Revenge too.
Yeah.
Revenge is more like. I feel like Revenge is more like, oh hell yeah, because she like gets to kill people.
Because I love that movie too.
And I mean, I think they make this movie, I think the advertising of this movie was maybe a little bit weird.
Yes.
Because I think, as far as the advertising goes, it kind of makes you think it's going to be a murder revenge thing. And
that's
it's not
exactly
that.
what I thought.
It's not. Yeah.
Okay.
So
they're
don't go.
definitely different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say very different. I mean, obviously a similar like message sort of like sexual assaults. I mean, I don't know. It's a weird, I don't know. There's just moments I think the reason I liked Promising Young Woman so much is that it's set a little bit more in reality than like a Revenge. Yeah. And there's moments of like, oh, she just won, you know, like, and she wins in like real life ways instead of it just being, oh, she slit that dude's throat or something, you know?
Sure.
Like,
I don't think that, I mean, this is my tie-up is like, I don't really think she did.
Oh, I feel like she did, but I mean, I get what you're saying, and I do think
about it after Andrea sees it, because it's like sort of I can see that, but there's some other things where I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like these dudes. We'll talk about it later, but the ending was tough for me in a way, but it's definitely different than Revenge. I personally like Revenge better, but have y'all seen Hunter x Hunter?
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, that's on my list.
Yeah, it's on my list.
Yeah.
That's another one that y'all should see too. That's definitely like oh yes.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, that one, like, I liked it, and I mean that obviously the end is like chef's kiss, but like it definitely took a while to get there for me. I mean, it's a slow burn for sure, and I don't know if it's like 100% payoff slow burn for me, but like I mean, because the ending is so good, but like I don't know,
it takes a big turn. You're not on that path the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got bored during it a little bit, so I wish that they had maybe sped it up or done a little bit more, but
I get that.
But yeah, anyways, Marisa, what's your
what's put a spell on me this week? Billy Zabka, as usual, with Cobra Kai. I'm obsessed
I
with
need to
him.
watch that. That's my next show.
It's so fun. Season 3 is so fun, so good. He's so hot. Really enjoy watching it. But other than that, for real, I'm reading this book called The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. McMahon, and it's really good. I'm kind of flying through it, and it's about It's a horror novel, and it takes place in like 2 different time periods, in like the early 1900s and then present day. And it's about this woman who was murdered, but she had this aunt that could have the ability to bring people back from the dead, and kind of told her the secret of how to do it. And then she ends up getting murdered, and then the book that she wrote, her diary, wrote how to like do all this, was found later in present day by a young girl who lives in this woman's house.
Interesting.
And so there's like missing people in it, necromancy. It's like a family drama. It's really creepy. It's really entertaining and fun. So yeah, I'm about halfway through it. I think it'd be an awesome movie, actually. And the reviews are saying that it's like hauntingly beautiful, reminiscent of Stephen King, which I can kind of see for sure in the way that it's written and the way that it flows and the character development. So that book has kind of got my attention lately.
Okay, Andrea.
All right, so mine is called Sweet Home. It's a TV series that is available on Netflix, and it is a apocalyptic horror South Korean television series that has not only scared me, but it's made me cry. This thing is ridiculous. Some of the CG is over the top. I'm not gonna deny that. But I think it's appropriate for the depth of the human emotion that you feel when you go through the movie. So basically there's like these people in these apartments and these weird incidents that start happening, and people are turning into monsters that take the form of hidden desires.
That's
and it is,
yeah.
I am not all the way through it yet, but there is some great acting. The story is amazing, and it's scary. And I'm gonna say, like, not doing any deep dive into it, that this is probably my favorite series of 2020.
Ooh.
Where can you watch it again?
Netflix. It's called Sweet Home.
Sweet Home.
Yeah,
I've seen
I'm
that
not
pop up as my one of my recommended things.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try to pronounce the South Korean version of the name, but Sweet Home, you'll find it, and it is so good.
Awesome.
Thank you everyone so much for listening to the first season of the Black Magic Coven. We have really enjoyed interacting with our audience and seeing you guys on Facebook and Instagram and hearing your feedback. We hope that you continue to send us feedback and comment on our stuff. We will continue to be active on social media, but we are going to take a bit of a break and get prepared for our season 2, which will come back in the spring. So make sure you are, following us on whatever you prefer to follow us on. You can look for us anywhere, and we are at Black Magic Coven. You can also we will also hashtag Black Magic Coven. I said hashtag like 50 times. And you can also follow just the hashtag Black Magic Coven as well to look for updates. But we will definitely keep you updated on when we will be premiering season 2. So in the meantime, make sure you check out all of the other shows that the Crickets Network has to offer, including the new show, That's Strange, which is actually debuting its 3rd season, but is new to Crickets Network. Make sure you check that out and just give the Crickets Network some love. There's some really good content on there. Not just the Black Magic Coven ladies, but there's lots of other things on there too. So if you like spooky stuff, it's a great place to find your spooky fix. We hope that you have a lovely day, and this concludes the gathering of the Black Magic Coven.
listening to a Downright Creepy original on the Crickets Podcast Network.